I was thinking,
Any?
I was thinking this morning about our topic today on motivation,
Yeah.
and and it started to get kind of like this big rubric in my mind, because you've got 5 generations in the workplace. Many of those, like even within our generation of baby boomers, I'm a boomer, have different life stages, right? Yeah. So it's like, I think it must be a really challenging thing to be inside of a reward and recognition, program today. Is that kind of your experience, Sam? Like, if you think back to like how it was maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, but when I study the generational, what motivates generations, and it's really not as much about the generation as it is about the life stages.
Yeah.
At a particular point in time. I mean, the generational aspect does make a difference. I mean, of course, those that went through, I mean, even back through the Great Depression, or are more in that, security. There's dominant factors in each generation, technology, industrial, stuff like this. But really, the life stages are quite the same. I mean, right now they bring the parallel between, like this was a couple of years ago, actually, the millennials, and and equating them to like when the what was it, pre-Vietnam era, so there was, so a lot of the similar, or during the Vietnam War too, is a lot of the similar type of unrest and outspokenness, and how that was brought into the culture is quite the same between the boomers of that period and versus millennials of now. But now, of course, they're in a different life period, which means that they have different expectations from the workplace. So.
Wouldn't you think that the one universal thing that would keep us all motivated is coffee?
Yeah, that's what I would rely on every morning.
Would not be anything about generation or lifespan, and if it's not coffee, it's a good strong cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what gets us motivated.
That's where this is number 2 for me. So
yeah,
we're gonna talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's at the very bottom of it.
Or you could be like me, that annoys my boyfriend because I have 2 different mugs floating around. Which one are you drinking out of now this morning?
Yeah.
And you got to be careful, because some generations have what my dad, who's what they call the greatest generation, referred to as a bracer in the coffee.
Oh, bracer. Okay.
A bracer. What is that? The shot of your favorite adult beverage? Yeah.
It's whiskey.
Yeah, I had an HR manager once that told me that she was, sitting at a desk with her HR assistant, and they were talking about whatever, reports or hiring. And the HR manager accidentally grabbed her assistant's cup of coffee and took a sip of it. And there was definitely Bailey's in there. So now this isn't a real job. Where no drinking is allowed on the job.
Well, Bailey's that's almost a creamer, really.
I was just gonna say, I don't know.
Yeah, there's really so little alcohol in that. After, if you had a whole cup of Bailey's, that'd be a problem.
Well, this is a long-term employee too, so she's probably been doing that for a while.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there are lots of different things that motivate, but I would agree with you, Char. I think the universal motivator is definitely caffeine.
But I do think you both have some very good points.
How do you account for that in a reward program, Sam?
Yes. Well, they now have Uber Eats and meal clubs, and maybe we need a coffee club.
Well, I think that there was some movement. I mean, I don't know where. I think different companies are in different places about this. You've got in Colorado, you have so many tech companies that have full kitchens with like any food you want any time of day.
Yeah.
And including beer and wine. right? I remember when my daughter was working for SendGrid, and they were just about to go public. They were the first company here in Colorado that had gone out of the come out of the incubator and gone public. And so she was working there, and I went over there for something, and she was giving me the tour. You go into their kitchen, and it is literally like,
Oh, yeah.
fully 100% stocked with whatever you wanted any time of day. Plus you could order from any one of like 10 places around downtown.
Well, we'll talk about that today, because that is part of one of the motivate. That's actually a motivator, having those pieces there. Matter of fact,
oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, I asked the head of HR, I'm like, you have just beer on tap here, and you have like bottles of wine sitting out on the counter. Like, how does anybody get any work done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said to me, we hire people who know how to get their work done.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you want to drink beer all day, that's your business.
Yeah. Was that Patty Money you spoke to?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's a good friend of mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I interviewed her. I was starting a podcast, and she was my first interview.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
That's great. Yeah.
I should send it to you. It was pretty cool. I think it exists somewhere in this internet sphere. Nothing ever goes away.
That sounds like a good topic for a future people strategy forum for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say about the food in the break room areas. I mean, I know people that specialize on stocking those with healthy alternatives, and so forth. And that's a big thing too. They have a whole business just around that, making sure that there's healthy stuff.
Right. The healthy employer, as I always say.
Yep.
Well,
Right.
I have to say, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so happy to be part of our People Strategies Forum, and we've been going for some time now. We've been going since the end of March, and just been rocking and rolling every Wednesday, Mountain Time, 10 a.m. And here we are again. So thank you so much for joining us. And I am just so pleased to be working with my colleagues here. And we are all about mastermind of leaders dedicating creating workplaces that thrive, employer reward, and customers love. So we just love giving the most innovative, progressive, new ideas, because your traditional HR and talent management strategies are not going to work as well today as they did many months ago, as we know, through all this change. So today I'm happy to introduce myself. My name is Char Miller. I am a people strategist, and also I own a company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates that I get to apply all these people strategy principles with. So that's super interesting, and been very helpful in operating in my business. I also do career coaching called HR with the Heart. And I also have strong HR background, and am a talent management strategist. Also happy to have Sam Reeve, and he has been great. We met several years ago, and he is the founder and CEO of CompTeam, and he's just got a very powerful team who's really been the driving force behind these people strategies and helping host those on CompTeam.net. Also, Lisa Jackson is a culture strategist with Corporate Culture Pros, and boy, I have to tell you, Lisa, you've got some exciting things happening in the culture space. So you really need to watch her, and she's been a great addition to our team. And then Sumit Singla is also a people strategist, and take a look at his background. He's worked with some pretty dynamic companies about people strategies. And so the four of us have really been powering up and doing these people strategies every week. So today we are very excited to get into our topic, and motivating people for performance and leveraging intrinsic and extrinsic on people motivation. So I think a lot of us struggle with people motivation at all levels and all age groups and all diversities. So we're gonna have a nice hard talk about that great information. So Sam, you're gonna be our primary lead today to lead us through what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, a lot of good information here. So I mean, the motivation is a topic that I'm always excited to talk about, because it's there's so many facets to it. I mean, there's been since the Industrial Revolution, when people started looking into this more and more, a lot of things have been layered onto this because of just how society has changed over time, and technologies come into play. So motivation is multifaceted, and there's not just one thing that motivates at any particular time. So it's going to be a really great discussion today. So we're going to start off just talking a little bit about the basics of motivation, going a little bit into history, looking at how the theory is developed over time, and how we can apply those pieces in today's world. We're going to talk about the important intrinsic motivations, or that internal drive to succeed, and also the extrinsic factors such as pain rewards. Another part of my quiver of arrows that I use in my practice. And then we're going to talk about how to align that and have motivational alignment, and a basket of rewards that drive performance in your workplace. And then, of course, have our regular open discussion at the end of all this. So let's start off with a little bit of history and going through some of these theories. Now, a lot of the times when we it's almost a natural thing, we refer back to Abraham Maslow, who he started his theory in 1943, and it's the hierarchy of needs. So we see this a lot. We talk about this a lot, and there's been a lot of other theories, as you can see, throughout history. There's Alderfer and Hertzberg and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit about what their contribution is and how that applies to today's workplace. But what Maslow did for us is he gave us this nice hierarchy. You know, those primary needs, that physiological, and it goes into safety, and of course, in the higher order needs, as we see here. And so he really brought in those steps and said that, you know, typically you need to satisfy these lower or primary needs first before you get to the safety, before you get to belonging, before you get to esteem. It's kind of that hierarchy. And so that's what he brought out. And then we had Addifer, or Clayton Addifer, of 1969, and the way he actually built on Maslow's theory. And he said that basically, okay, well, it doesn't have to be a hierarchy. One doesn't have to be satisfied before the other. Some of these you can be operating simultaneously or in several places at once. And I think that we found that to be somewhat true. However, if we look at some of these basic level needs, you'd say, well, geez, we need to have air and water and safe working environments before you can think about anything else. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we have Hertzberg. And so Frederick Hertzberg, in his theory, was in 1959. And the thought here is that you know, the primary needs are you know, those are the, you know, basic needs of motivation, but they're not enough to really drive business performance. You know, once we have those satisfied, such as adequate pay, you know, safe work environment, and so forth, that gets us to a basic level, but it doesn't drive us to perform and achieve work goals. And so that's what Hertzberg was really trying to point out. Now, this has been tested in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think that we can say that, yeah, it's true that we need other factors to really drive performance. But like, there was a study done by the European Agency for Safety and Health, and this was done not too long ago, and they just found that a healthy work environment was enough to really drive a lot of productivity in the workplace. And I'm sure that you can, you know, you've seen that, Char. The other thing that they found, and this is not, and we think about these things and they just don't sound that surprising. You know, there's another one that was a study in 2003 that it was done by the Lighting Research Center of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and also the National Research Council of Canada. They did a study together on the effect of lighting in the workplace and how that actually stimulates performance. So of course we have better lighting conditions. We have higher quality lighting. Everybody's thinking about, you know, when we had the old days, we had those fluorescent lights that would blink and it would drive you crazy by the end of the day. Well, it's only obvious that if you have better lighting and good conditions, that's going to help enhance performance.
I have to interject here because this is a really important topic. I actually had a team of 11 employees, and now this is prior to COVID, right? This is obviously a couple of years ago, but we had Cubicle City, and challenging part is that the directors would all be in the nice, bright offices that surrounded the cubicles. The directors, the VPs, and
Yeah.
all the frontline, what we call frontline, or the essential workers, as I say, in the world of HR, learning and development, OD, all of that, process improvement. They were all in these small, dark cubicles. And absolutely, we had complaints about lighting. We had complaints about, a proper, feeling at work, and other types of health conditions. Not only the fact that the air conditioning was right over those particular cubicles that was causing problems with air quality. And so it was a massive complaint, and we did not quite know what to do with it. So I would imagine that particular company today, all of those folks are working in nice, bright offices, probably from home now.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
things may have changed for the better as far as getting a better working environment from your home environment.
And yeah, those are part of the complications that employers are dealing with today, is that they don't really have control over the home environment.
Right.
Is there a workplace or an environment in the workplace that's really going to drive or help enhance intrinsic motivation? They don't have the control over the air quality, they don't have control over the space or noise levels and so forth. And so that's a big challenge. But
It was certainly that way for my company I was working for in New York, right before the pandemic shut everything down. And in New York City, the vertical city.
yeah,
So you get like these 800 square feet apartments, and now you've got two, adults with children that they're homeschooling, and both of them are working from home in an 800 square foot apartment. So you have to wonder how that, it's a real interesting question about, on this topic about, that I'm sure you're going to get into, about how, different layers of needs being met, because for a lot of people, they didn't have to now get up, get dressed, and commute to work.
mm-hmm.
And so that is it's more motivating on that front, but then you've got these other challenges that offset it.
Right, absolutely. A lot, like I said, there's a lot of things to talk about here. And as far as when we think about motivation, it's important for us, consistent with what Adifer was talking about, there's not just one thing that drives motivation. It's a multitude of things. And for us to really, to ensure that we're really driving motivation in our workforce, we need to make sure that it's multifaceted, multi-layers. And there's a lot of complications that causes, and which we'll talk about in a moment. But real quick, as I finish out these different theories, one thing I want to mention here is Adifer does believe, like I mentioned before, that there's many places that motivation is driven, and there's not just one thing at any particular time. There's many things, and in our environment now, it's different by company. It's not one size fits all, because we need to make sure that you do a demographic analysis and understand. This is just what we were talking about earlier, Lisa, as far as the desires of the generations and their place in and their needs that are currently necessary or important to them right now are different as they age and get older. And it depends on the mix of your workplace. So what really needs to happen, and it's something that we do for our clients a lot, is perform what's called the workforce experience scorecard. And so we go in and we understand, what does the current workforce need and want to be able to perform well in their role. And then we develop motivational factors around that and rewards that enhance that in that environment. But like I said, it's different for every company. It's not one size fits all. So.
Well, I think it's really great that you put these models all together, because I think we often refer to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's always the Maslow.
Yeah.
But when you look at all the theories, they're all pretty much aligned.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize the foundation is beyond just one particular model.
Right, and they're all building on one another, which is nice. I think that Maslow did a really good job of showing the basic needs that need to be satisfied. And like it says here on the slide, a need is the lack of something that needs to be satisfied. And so the desire to satisfy that need is what drives that motivation. And so it was a good stepping stone, and these other professionals have built on that and continue to do so today. In fact, here we have Edward Deci and Richard Ryan in 1971. They're the ones that first came out with the idea that self-determination is very important and for our workers to drive performance. People need to have that autonomy, and they need to feel like they're competent to be able to drive, to have that motivation. And so there was a company in Brazil, Semco, their leader, and he started that around 1950, but he came around when this particular mindset came out from Deci and Ryan. The thought was that he was going to go from the traditional organizational structure and break that down into smaller business units or more defined business units, so that the managers in each one of those areas would feel like they had more accountability, more autonomy, and really driving the results of that workforce. And that worked well for that particular company. But like I said, it's not a one size fits all for everyone.
Right.
The other thing, Richard Hackman and Greg Oldman, in 1980, they did a study which showed that we all of us as individuals are driven by the unique skill sets or competencies that we have, and this is a key topic that we discuss a lot in the TMA method, is that we all bring a certain mix of competencies, and to the extent that a job is designed to best leverage those competencies, we're going to perform better and be more satisfied in our role. And so they came up with this theory in the 80s. And there's three main things that are needed to ensure that this happens effectively. So first of all, there needs to be constructive and regular feedback from managers. There needs to be that role needs to be designed around that person so it leverages their strengths. And then of course there needs to be that high degree of autonomy to ensure that this really resonates. So a lot of good thought there. And I'm going to talk about other pieces of that particular theory later on in this presentation.
Well, for an HR leader that's attempting to be more credible and to really bring substantial information to an executive team, understanding the differences of these theories is going to be very, very helpful. So this particular visual is great. And it ties to so many things such as autonomy. It ties to like employee engagement and a culture and everything. It ties to everything talent management strategy. So it's a great visual to use.
Let's talk about some of the other factors in Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. One of the things that he was saying that of course, there's a hierarchy in here. We've already discussed about how we could jump around here a little bit, but for there's a certain extent that those lower levels are quite dominant and need to be satisfied first, or they're going to have a more powerful need to be satisfied. And so in here, when we're looking about the rules, once a need is satisfied, it's no longer a motivating factor. And I think that this is a fact that we see a lot. A lot of companies out there feel like, well, if I pay competitively, then that's what I need to do to really ensure that people don't have to worry about pay and are motivated. And really that becomes once that need is satisfied, once a person gets a job and they feel like, okay, I'm paid fair, then that base pay that they have is no longer a driving force in their motivation. Other things become more dominant. So that's something we're going to talk about here as we go. But just to dive into the Maslow's hierarchy of needs a little bit more and how they relate to the workplace, the first thing, the physiological here, we have the food, water, and sleep, right? If we're working our people to where they're not getting the adequate amount of sleep, or they're not getting enough rest, they're not getting a degree of they're taking their work home with them, they're stressed, and it affects their sleep, that's going to be a primary need that's not satisfied. And we can't expect them to operate at their best when they come into the workplace the next day or operate from work at home. So so these are the things that, as we look at these pieces here, these are the things that enhance that intrinsic motivation, allows that intrinsic motivation to come out. If there's a failing in one of these, that intrinsic motivation doesn't happen. I mean, it stays bottled up because people are worried about their basic needs in each one of these pieces. The other thing,
I would say that could be very dangerous. So, for example, in the nursing world, if which is why a lot of our labor laws came out, and why we moved to 3 12-hour shifts in a week, because obviously, if our nurses don't get food, water, sleep, or even our surgeons and our physicians, that could be somebody's life that is going to be impacted. And it can be very, very dangerous, particularly right now with COVID and all the health crisis that we've been going through. Those foundations and making people, helping people get those physiological needs met is so critical right now. I would say even more than before.
Yeah, I was gonna say that my daughter's an EMT, and a lot of times and one of the things that hospitals do is they'll have these break rooms that are for first responders, and so because they know what happens when you're working on an ambulance, things can get kind of so crazy that you don't eat at regular intervals through your shift, and that adrenaline and running around can wear you down, and you're not able to operate properly. And so they have the hospitals actually have break rooms in their different areas for that purpose, to ensure that their first responders that are operating in that environment and can be nourished enough to be able to perform adequately. So,
yeah, and isn't that interesting? Because other situations, we've actually fired employees for sleeping on the job. But there may be something happening as to why we're finding people nodding off in the workplace. Maybe we're not looking at their basic needs.
well, definitely something out of balance there.
Right.
But these are things that we looked at, and we're going to dive into a little bit more of these things in a workplace context as we go. But as we see here, there's food, water, and sleep at the basic level, and then we're looking at having some physical security, a safe environment. We have to worry about, we're not in some economic security. This is where this piece, if we're as people are worried about being laid off of their jobs, they regress to this safety and security area, and they're not able to perform adequately. If we're feeling like, hey, I'm afraid of getting paid in my future pay, and I'm afraid of getting laid off, and so forth. I mean, it's hard for you to perform well in those environments. Here we have being a part of a group. We've talked about psychological safety a lot in the forum, and that's quite important. Ego and esteem, to really drive to these higher levels, you need to have those recognition programs in place, and show the respect and have programs that are dealing with focusing behaviors. And then, of course, self-actualization, opportunities to learn and growth and develop, and to really meet those higher ends. So all of this is going to work together and to help us with both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. But there's some pitfalls we need to think about.
Sam, can I just ask a question about the last slide? What I think it's going to come right into what you're talking about now. The slide says a satisfied need no longer motivates, right?
Right.
So with self-actualization, is that just so how does that, if learning growth, opportunities for learning and growth, opportunities for expanding, I guess, your repertoire, does that ever stop?
Yeah, it does, and it can. So there's always opportunities to grow, but there's ways that particular motivational principle can be harmed, and this is the motivation collapse principle here. And so let's say that everything's going great, and you're working your way up and you're in your learning and development. You have this person on a program, they're a successor, and so forth, and then suddenly their pay is not being managed, and so suddenly their pay falls behind what's considered competitive pay or adequate pay, And this, as you can, and adequate pay is at this very low level here. That's a primitive. I mean, you need to be paid at the certain level to be able to ensure that you're providing for your family. You can buy food, you can save for college, these types of things. And so when you're not paid enough, that triggers this lowest level, this philosophical area, and it causes a collapse. And no longer a bonus program or development programs they're no longer motivating because this more primitive need is not met. And so that becomes an issue. Another thing over here is the frustration regression principle. So as it was found that in a study that as you go up and you're trying to climb this motivational ladder here, and then if things get too difficult or there's too many barriers, then a person can regress down to a lower level. Now, example of this, just recently, I was talking about my daughter who's an EMT. She just started at a new job here locally, and she's learning to work in a emergency room environment. So she's no longer on the rig or the ambulance. She's in an in-house setting, and so things are a little bit different. And as she's learning, that she was working with a nurse, and the nurse says, can't you learn this faster? I mean, we've had other people that are here that can do this by now. Can't you watch a YouTube video or something and figure this out? And so the person was very hard on her, and in situations like that, when you are you're trying to develop and belong, and you get such a negative criticism or feedback that is not constructive, that it can cause you to retreat to a lower level to find security or success at that lower level of motivation. So for instance, in this particular situation, it could be finding more belonging along your coworkers that do show gratitude for you. And you forget about trying to move up or satisfy those higher needs because you're looking for safety and lower level needs because you're being threatened. So something to ensure, and that's why as managers we need to make sure that there's good behaviors among the colleagues, or giving constructive feedback and giving that kind of training to help enhance our intrinsic motivation.
I would say I have a real life example that's happening right now. We have an employee that we hired that has just been outstanding, very motivated, always showing up on time, always has innovative ideas, has truly demonstrated leadership ability because coming up with different marketing strategies and taking care of clients' strategies. And in fact, several weeks ago, we were talking to him about a potential management opportunity and really talking about, how he can lead others, and wasn't really sure he really had the time to take on being a leader at the time. But what was interesting in the last couple of weeks, he's been more and more vocal about his compensation. Mm-hmm. Now we've been very transparent because we're starting to work with Comp Team on reformatting our compensation strategies to make them more progressive in alignment. Thank you, Sam and team, for helping us with that. But what was interesting is he started being very vocal about his mistrust with the basic compensation that we have, and started vocalizing it. So we really had to sit down and have more of a fundamental physiological dialogue about his compensation and how we are truly paying him fairly and everything. And it's interesting because just 2 weeks ago, we were talking to him about management. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I'm glad he's being transparent and being open with us, but it's just interesting how I like what you're saying, because he's kind of moving up and down that whole motivation, because, we are starting to see he might not be as motivated if he doesn't for being fair.
Yeah, that's a good example of what's happening here. We see this, this collapse or this orange explosion right here, right? So in the situation you just explained to me, Char, is that he was operating on development. We were getting him groomed for a managerial position, and so he's moving up that towards self-actualization. You got him on training and a development plan. But then his safety and security was compromised because mm-hmm. the compensation how he's being paid, or his bonus and incentives are somewhat of a black box. He didn't understand how it was calculated or whatever. And that type of environment can foster mistrust because you just don't understand.
Right.
And so that's why it's very important for companies to ensure that there's adequate communication and rewards, and make sure that make sure that your employees know how to influence or to earn that reward. And once they have that trust, then it satisfies that security need.
Yes, and in larger organizations, like one of the larger organizations I worked with, my quote book of business in HR was around 3,000 employees, and we would have our compensation director prepare and go out and do and the HR business partners had to go out and communicate the compensation programs as well. What was fascinating to me is some departments were like, yeah, that's great, new compensation plan, new merit program, new whatever it is, understood it. But then other departments was very like adversarial, didn't understand, very confrontational. And it was interesting because some of the executives are just like, it is the way it is. This is the new comp program, and this is when it's rolling out, and they just need to accept it. But from a cultural standpoint, I think looking at this, we need to really understand what's going on underneath, that our employees are not understanding what's happening with comp or
Right.
basic rewards.
All right. So the next thought here I want to point out is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Now, I think we've been talking a lot about intrinsic motivation in the past few slides, and that's really the satisfaction from the activity itself. I mean, we do the things we love. We have an inherent motivation to do that thing, and whereas extrinsic motivation is when it's like pay and rewards, when we're motivating people with an external force. You do that, you get this. So it's a little bit different. Now, in a lot of you out there that are listening may recall the book that Dan Pink wrote, Drive, a couple of years ago. And he spends a lot of time talking about the importance of intrinsic motivation and kind of discounts the extrinsic. But I'm here to tell you that they need to be done in tandem. To really drive those higher needs, you need extrinsic motivation to help focus behavior. And it needs to be, but it needs to be with intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the building block where extrinsic motivation can thrive. So there was a study that was done by Lyndon Porter and Edward Lawyer in 1968, where they did a study on this, and they found that it's really a combination of both these intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that really drive performance. And the study was called Managerial Attitudes and Performance, and so a real good study there. So we're going to dive a little bit more into these details, starting with intrinsic motivation right here. Now, so what are intrinsic motivation? These are the things that we're looking as. First, it needs to be a desire in the people that we're hiring for organization. And so we're looking for the interest in their role. So number one, hire right and identify their superpowers, and I'll go through that in a minute. The next is encourage a positive mindset, provide challenges in autonomy and development, and recognize achievements and contribution. These pieces, once you have the seed of intrinsic motivation that you've identified in a person, this is what makes that grow into a flower and basically provide that performance. So we're as a business, we're interested in these things of how to foster and bring out that intrinsic motivation to allow it to grow. And so the first thing is being able to hire right. You need to go out there, and right now is more important than ever to make sure that you're hiring the right person. Why? Is because everybody right now that is in part of those primary needs or that lower level needs in Maslow's hierarchy. I mean, let me just go back a few slides here. We're looking at a lot of people are in the physiological or safety and security. They're lost their job or fear that they might not get employed in a timely fashion. They're worried about their income. And so a lot of people are desperate out there. And of course, that is a very sad thing for society, but it's also a cautionary tale for employers, because what we need to do is we need to make sure that we recognize that people out there are more desperate. And it's more important for us than ever to ensure that we're hiring people that have a passion, a real passion, and an intrinsic motivation to do the job that you're offering for them. And so how do we do this? So,
Right. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt here. I was going to say, absolutely. With our company, we were shut down during the COVID with all the lockdown. Obviously, now we're on a hiring surge and hiring, 8 to 15 new people, not only here in Colorado, but in Montana. And it's interesting because we are hiring people coming off that physiological, desperate, need a job, need benefits, need that safety and security. And what's been interesting is identifying that superpower, because the type of candidate we're looking for is not only a quote sales candidate, but also has to have that compassion, caring around health advocacy, and has to have some competencies and superpowers in order to truly take care of our clients. And we have suffered some turnover because we didn't hire the right person with the right superpower.
mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about a new and progressive way of talent acquisition, I think digging in and looking, and you're about to share this with the TMA, I know, we've also been doing that, but to really identify those types of behaviors and superpowers, as you call it, we've actually identified some real high level superstars, just blew our socks off with some of the people that we've hired.
Yes.
Using these tools.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of these tools in the marketplace right now, and TMA is one of them that focuses on competencies and around the job and job fit. And but there's others in the market that it's important to use these to help create a better conversation during the interview as you're going through this process. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to find that, do they really have a passion for this job? Are they going to be intrinsically motivated by the tasks and activities they perform during the work? This is the main job of talent acquisition, is to ensure that exists. Now, some of these tools right now will help you do this. For instance, if they do with a TMA, you can have your different jobs, and I'm showing that here in the on this slide, such as coach, supervisor, HR manager. Each of these have a particular competency set that's around it. And if you assess your candidates effectively using tools like this or through a conversational interview, you'll find out if they're best fit, if they're fitted for that job. And so this is one way of showing what job there might be best at. So for instance, they'd be strong as a coach or account management position at this particular company in this example. There's other factors, you can learn a little bit more about their personality or their talents and so forth that will help you understand if they have a basic fit for the role. But the most important thing is to really identify what we call the superpower. So what is that? So the superpower of a particular candidate is what really drives them. I mean, when we think about a job, like for instance, HR management or being an HR business partner. There's a lot of things to that. I mean, you're dealing with the company policy and maybe in consulting the business and dealing with a lot of different HR needs, working with people and so forth. But it could be that superpower or that thing that person is most driven by in that job is the fact that they get to work with managers and coach managers. And so that might be their superpower. They may be well equipped all in HR, but they love coaching managers and developing managers. And so when you are meeting with a person for the first time and you're bringing them into the team, it's important to identify that passion that they have and to communicate that passion among your team. And it doesn't have to, it's not like you have to give out an award, say, here you go, you're great at this. you can simply just say, it's like, oh, here's Sally. She loves, one of the things that she loves to do is working with managers to develop them, and that is a huge passion of hers. So if you have any questions, I know she's really great at that. Go talk to her. She'll share her knowledge around that skill set. And so when people hear that, and it gives them a sense of value in that internal motivational drive to do better, and engage them in that intrinsic motivation. It's very important. So this other piece, the next piece here, is to encourage a positive mindset. So now we've gone through the phase of hiring that right person that has that intrinsic motivation, and now they're part of our company. And there's a lot of things that we need to do to continue to foster and cultivate that passion, so that it turns into real motivation. And so the first thing is like we have here, confidence and believing. So we need to make sure that they have confidence in their skill. And part of this is by giving them that positive feedback in recognition, and when you see that skill being exhibited in the workplace. Oh, that was great. What you said there in that meeting was awesome. These types of things will build confidence and encourage that to come out more and more. And they'll make them believe in that. And believing also talks about believing where the company is heading and being confident in the management team. And this is another thing that helps bring out that intrinsic motivation. Because if you think about it, if you come into a company and you get distrust of the management, or you don't believe in the future vision of the company or where the company is heading, then it starts putting a dampening effect on your personal drive towards that company. If you don't feel like the driver of that company is taking you in the right place, it's not going to use your skills effectively.
Correct. And I would say it's also, we need to be careful about when we're going through that onboarding process after we've hired the superstar candidates, the individuals that are doing the onboarding and the training and orientation, if the ones that are doing the training don't have confidence in themselves and believing in themselves, that's only going to permeate the culture and permeate the people that we're bringing into the organization. And, it does take management involvement and HR involvement to really observe that behavior. It's one of the things that we noticed was some of the phrasings that was being said of not believing in themselves. So the new hire's like, well, if they don't believe in themselves, why should I believe in myself?
Yeah.
Why should I be optimistic that I have a future here?
Right.
Really critical right now.
Next piece here is optimism and realism. And so when we're talking about optimism, optimism is very important in a workplace to drive motivation, because, especially when you're dealing with your customers, everybody wants to work with somebody that is upbeat, that is, that has a view of success of the future. And when you have people that are, they're down and out and they're being negative in the workplace, doing what you can to change that mindset is very important to ensure that it's not infectious and goes across the team. And so changing that mindset into a more optimistic nature is quite important. The next thing is realism. There's one of the faults of a serial optimist, I guess you could say, is that they can believe that they can set their goals too high, and they can march towards those goals, and then they get disappointed, and it's a roller coaster. So ensuring that you're scaling back and making sure that you're managing those individuals for goals that are realistic and within and with the appropriate time set is quite important to keep them motivated in the long term.
Right. And I think, I call it solve world hunger. Sometimes those of us that have positive optimism and think we can fix everything, we take on the entire world or everything that we're going to fix. And right now, a lot of companies are going through total transformation, very different than what we were many months ago. And what we do is we set ourselves up to fail if we don't focus on the essential few and do it well. So, and I think we need to not just lean on our superstars to say, you're going to fix everything. We need to be realistic about what our superstars can do and what all of us can do to support that success together.
Right. Another thing here, belonging and diversity. Now, this is shown to be more and more important as we are becoming a more self-actualized social society. And we know the value of that these different cultures, different races, and experiences of different companies, and it can bring a perspective in the organization. It can bring innovation and clear thinking and new thinking. And so ensuring that people are inclusive of others' ideas, that are have that psychological safety and in groups, and thinking about diversity and the importance of diversity, and making sure that your team is aware of that, can increase that innovation power and excel, have people move higher up into that hierarchy, into self-actualization.
And that's
Another
so
thing,
relevant today, right? I
yeah.
mean, all of these topics are so relevant right now with diversity, optimism. A lot of us out there are having struggles with mental positive mindset,
Yep,
and all of these
exactly.
factors are influencing that.
Now, other thing here that I mentioned is creativity and imagination. Now, there's a lot of programs out there that companies do to try to keep this fostering growth, because what we're trying to do is remember what I said is people kind of stay in a hierarchy, in that motivational ladder that they feel comfortable in. And so at times we need to encourage them to grow and move up to that higher ladder. And so challenges on a regular basis can do this. So a lot of companies will have a innovation a challenge where anybody in the company can submit a new idea. When I was at Barclays about 10 years ago, they would do this on a regular basis. They would have an innovation award, and it could come from anybody from the janitorial staff all the way to your portfolio managers. They coming up with an idea, and they can submit that in, and those that generate the most, that move the bar the most, would be recognized as the those to be that would be recognized as part of that event. And so it was quite inspiring, but it's those types of programs that keep people from, it stops them from getting out of the day to day and says, okay, let's think about something different and what we can do differently and do better, and to move them up. And also the important part of that is the company is reaching out to their employees and say, I want to know what you think. And that, just that communication itself, is a way to feel like a person has impact and can contribute to the organization.
Yeah, we had an employee that a simple staff meeting that came up with the idea of a phone sanitizer, the ultra light phone sanitizer, because we work in malls mainly. And she said, why don't we have those there so that all of those individuals in the malls can put their phone in there, have their phone sanitized, and it's in there for a good 60 seconds, So we now get to talk to them about health advocacy and how much does a phone sanitizer cost? Like 40,
Right.
$50. It was one of the most brilliant ideas, and it's been working beautifully. Because people really like to have their phones sanitized. Everybody has them.
Especially nowadays, right? And so
Right.
that's quite important.
Very creative.
So the next thing is we talked in this slide here, we're talking about encouraging those positive mindsets, but really this all comes down to communication, and making sure that you're communicating effectively to that particular group. And so in a study done by Heidi Grant, well, actually she was part of the team, Heidi Grant Halverson, she did a video on the Harvard Business Review I watched a while back. It's pretty good. Explains this from a high level. But she's a associate director of that Columbia Business School for motivational science, and in that study, they're looking at the difference between prevention-focused people and promotion-focused people. And so the prevention-focused people are they're more concerned about security and avoiding mistakes and being right and so forth. And then the promotion focused are more your risk takers and brainstormers and optimistic and so forth. And there's places for both these people in an organization, and we need to understand where a person's dominant mindset is when we're communicating with them if we want to really drive their performance levels. So there was a study that was done by this group. It was the semi-pro soccer league in Germany, or what we call they call football, of course. The goal that they had was in the study that they wanted the managers or the coaches in this situation to have their team make the most kicks into the goal, the penalty kicks, be successful. And they were going to be able to shoot 5 kicks, and they wanted to be good at getting the most in the goal, right? And so they both communicated. One was saying that one group said to you're gonna shoot 5 penalty kicks, and your obligation is to not miss more than twice. And the other group was communicated the similar message, saying you're going to shoot 5 penalty kicks, and your aspiration is to score at least 3 times. And so the result of both of those, I mean, it's the same goal that's communicated in a different fashion. One is more of what you can lose, and one is more of what you can gain. And what they found is that those that have a prevention mindset, and they heard the obligation not to miss, that made them more successful in achieving more goals, as much as 2 times more successful in achieving more goals, and vice versa for the promotion focus. So it's really important for us to understand when we're talking to our teams, to understand where they're coming from. Are they more prevention focused and promotion focused? And we can actually increase our motivational power by 2 times by just adjusting the way we're communicating effectively.
So I had this conversation with, actually we're going through a TMA response and dialogue with one of my manager employees that I thought also might be great for a management opportunity. And we opened up a dialogue about her security and worried about risk taking, worried about a structured process. And I thought that she was going to be a more manager level person. But, I realized she wasn't into risk taking. She wasn't into being innovative or creative. And she wasn't at all offended that I brought up that point. And it actually took the TMA dialogue to really open up that conversation, to really understand that she might not be the person to promote into a management level role.
Yeah, so understanding what a person's ambitions are is quite important when we're thinking about that. So in a situation like this, for instance, here, this next piece is we may want to provide challenges and autonomy in development. And development doesn't necessarily mean they have to move up the ladder, right?
Right.
I mean, when we talk about career architecture, which is part of this, is you can move in, you can build your competencies and become more valuable to the organization, but stay in your same role. And so there's a lot of ways of doing this. And so here we talked about a little bit about the principle of self-determination from Desi and Ryan. Now, this is basically giving people the opportunity to develop and grow in their career. And they found in their study that what we need to do is give people the autonomy, give them autonomy in the task. We got to make sure that they're ready for the task, of course. That's our job as managers, making sure that that particular person is ready and is going to be successful, has a high probability of success in the role that they're going to take on. And then we give them autonomy when we move them in there. The next is to give them regular feedback and coaching through the process to make sure that they're successful. And then finally, the most important part is to accept those results from them as that they deliver as part of that role. Now, when we accept those results, I mean, of course, we don't need to micromanage. We need to make sure that we're about 70%, 80% confident, or I would have done it maybe a little bit different, but that person's captured the tenets of that particular task and are doing well at it, and we allow them to grow and flourish. and we need to realize that when we first put somebody out in a new role, they're not going to come back with a 100% performance on their first try. It may not be exactly what you're looking for, but we need to, that's part of the growth of making that person develop and to perform well and perform better and be highly motivated. So a big piece of this is ensuring that you have development opportunities, not only up the career ladder, but across. I mean, here's an example of a career architecture where we're looking at jobs and how each job may go up the ladder, but then there's also opportunities across the organization as well. So there's ways you can identify competencies for similar roles that people can develop into or aspire into. And also, I think that's another piece that was part of the, oh yes, it was the, I'm looking at my notes here, was part of the Richard Hackman and George Oldman study that they did in 1980s about job characteristics. And so in that particular study, they found that, like we mentioned before, designing a job around a person's strengths can increase performance. Well, the next piece that they went on to saying is that there's the job expansion is quite important. So even if you're in a small company, you say, okay, we don't have that next level job and then the next level job, but you can continue to expand the role and by adding those tasks both horizontally and vertically. So horizontally meaning that they can take on more tasks or perhaps go into a job rotation with similar type of roles. And then more vertically, they can participate more in the decision making or management around that particular role. I mean, involved in that. So even if you don't have a promotional opportunity, you can have a job expansion opportunity for them.
Well, I think it's a maturity level of a manager or a manager of a department to really think about that, because oftentimes, particularly in a smaller department, let's say 8, and I've actually had departments that size, and the manager's been there for 25 years, there's really nowhere to go because that manager or director is going to be there. And but also that manager needs to be open to the fact that, this person may be interested in marketing. This person may be interested in going into a completely different alignment, that can expand and develop, and to really have those open dialogues. So I think as an HR leader or as an organization development leader, we need help facilitate that conversation, help that manager open up those dialogues, also partner with other leaders in the organization to really think about what we can do to provide that autonomy and development for that employee. Mm-hmm. And really take the time to care about that employee growth and career mobility.
That's right. That's what the thing that's part of that belonging tier is managers that care about their employees and their development. And that's one thing that the TMA platform will help doing is it helps give managers that ideas for coaching feedback and development that can help them move along. And so there's making sure that those opportunities are available for employees is quite important. And like I said, you don't have to have the job available to provide those growth opportunities. But we should make sure that we understand the strengths of a person, and then those competencies that they want to develop so that they can get to the next role that they wish to go into.
Well, things are moving quicker and quicker than ever, and particularly with our younger demographic, they don't have the patience to wait 2 years, 3 years, 4 years for a personal development plan to be worked on. It's like, I need to know now, where's the direction of my career with this company? Where am I going to develop, and how are you going to help me grow and give me the support I need? And that can't take years to happen. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about retention and disgruntledness and lack of employee engagement, those are critical factors. Right.
And so knowing these factors, and we talked about learning style in past discussions as well. It's important to develop people in a way that's going to resonate with them and their type of learning style. Quite important, because nothing is, and we don't want to demotivate a person, and by putting them into giving them a learning challenge and then putting them into an environment where they don't absorb the material. So that's quite important as well.
Yeah, I've been definitely seeing examples of that where we rely on our learning management systems and we rely on technologies to teach our staff and never really truly sit down and look at the learning style differentiators in that particular grid, your last slide, and learning how to match up individuals with the right learning partnerships and mentoring programs. So it's nice to see a comparison of those two between the mentor and the mentee, or or I call it leaders as coach type of working relationship with that employee. So having that insight is really helpful.
Right. Okay, the next piece, recognition, recognize achievement in their contributions. And so super important here, and recognition. And recognition is a way that, like I mentioned before, that communication that encourages regular motivation. And now the important part of recognizing individuals, we have to understand that there's different tiers of recognition. You know, the thing that we've heard, the critique we've heard about recognition in the past few years is that in this particularly in America, where, you know, your child does a sport and everybody gets a trophy, you know, it's like, you know, it's like if we do that, we kind of cheapen the recognition itself. And so what's important is that we need to realize that there's different levels of recognition. And so right here is what I call the cordial recognition, or daily informal recognition. And this is simply these are the things that can be handed out like candy, right? Those are, you know, hey Char, great job on that presentation. You know, Lisa, you know, what you said in that meeting was awesome. You know, these pieces these are the pieces of recognition that we can give out on a frequent basis, and creating a culture of recognition is quite important in ensuring that people vocalize these on a regular basis.
You know, I wanted to just pop into the group a comment that I think is really relevant to this, that Andre is making, about that when development only focuses on the job improvement, or what you're talking about, even a recognition focuses on what you did well, it most likely sort of really feeds that extrinsic motivation rather than combining it with personal interests. Hey, you know, your hair looks really cute today is probably a bad example, but just something that's more personal interest on people's part, you know, elevates that intrinsic motivation. It's like, I thought that was a really powerful comment that he's talking about, that recognition shouldn't be just oriented toward job performance, but also what, you know, that person cares about.
Yeah, and we were talking
which presupposes you've taken the time to find out. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the superpower thing that I brought up earlier.
Yeah.
And so if we know what a person really loves to do, what their passion is around their job, and we recognize that, and I mean that is the piece that, I mean, every manager should have that in mind. Okay, what about you know, Lisa? What about Char? What is their superpower? What is really their passion? And constantly drive recognition to those pieces to reinforce and drive happiness in their career.
Well, that's exactly why in my company we have more closer to part-time hours for all of our employees, so they can go after their passions. You know, we have a drummer, we have a motivational speaker, we have an individual that helps sex traffic children. Actually, that's his goal. You know, obviously I do these people's strategy forums. So it's okay. And thank you, Andre and Lisa, for bringing that up. It's okay if someone has interests outside of work, because if we support that individual, recognize them for those achievements, even think about how we can bring that into the organization, into our model of their talents or superpowers, even though it might not seem extremely relevant. Boy, I tell you, they are so excited to work with this company. So it's important to understand outside of work.
That's part of what we were talking about in the past, is bringing the whole self to work. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's no longer the stodgy workplace of the past where we're in a corporate environment and we have to be all buttoned up with our tie and stuff like that. So, I mean, we can bring our passions and our life, our work life to the workplace, and that helps us have that social cohesion, and helps people think of others as, hey, they're more than just the tasks that they produce at work. I mean, they're a drummer, they're a musician, there's a lot of things that people are that brings people more closely together and relate to one another.
Yeah, Sam, I think that on this front, one question that is central to my work around culture change, if I'm coming into an organization, is that I'll see a lot of people who are holding power, especially in larger organizations or organizations that really haven't been forced to evolve, are still holding that you should just be happy to have a job. That really is a very prevalent mindset in a lot of organizations still today that are run by, I think, maybe more traditional values, that were very solid a generation or two ago.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what you're talking about, I'm guessing that everybody that's sitting on this forum and listening, you're preaching to the choir, right? But it's really, how do we get these messages across to the people who are in these very powerful roles, that it is, if you want to have access to the best talent supply, and arming our HR professionals with tools that help them convince. This is a really powerful version of it today. So.
Right. And exactly. And your point of what you said, I mean, when a person is trying to reach higher levels of motivation here, and then their manager comes over, you should be happy to have a job. I mean, they're driving them back down into this pyramid,
Right.
So it's like the wrong thing to say. You're just killing motivation there. So
and they're like, why is it I can't constantly have turnover? Why is it I can't find good staff?
Why do people need to be motivated? They've got a paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. Just do your job.
Well, and some employees will be just as motivated just to go back on unemployment if they, they're going to make just as much on unemployment.
Yeah. Okay, so back on recognition. And so recognition comes in several different forms, and there's 3 of them, and I'm going to go through each one. And we talked about the cordial, your daily recognition, thank yous, and so forth, on just acknowledging, and I call it cordial because it's to create general happiness and decency in the workplace. It's not really meant to be a huge motivator, but it creates the psychological or the social cohesion and safety there. And this can be those thank you notes, verbal praise, and etc. Now, the next piece here is more milestone or informal communication or recognition, and this can be based on those achieving project outcomes and celebrating that. It can be non-cash oriented. Just have an event where you have refreshments or you're celebrating the completion of that project. It can be very low cost and very meaningful. And then in the outstanding area, this is where we want to be very selective, more formal, and these types of recognition are for your top 10% of performers. It's usually something organized and company-wide, nomination process, things like this. And the reason why there's a nomination process and maybe even a committee around this is you want to make sure that there's good rigor around selecting that particular individual that was truly earned, and you don't want to demotivate others by feeling, why did so-and-so get that? I worked just as hard. You want to make sure that this is truly above and beyond, and you want to ruin the motivation by recognizing a person that didn't truly achieve it. And so quite important. And so here, these percentages on the pyramid that I'm showing is the percent of those that should be, roughly eligible for the program or be impacted by the program. So typically cordial around 100%, depending on how you run the program. Milestone, somewhere in the middle there, but definitely your outstanding should be the top 10%, 10 to 15%, right around there.
So I have seen a hospital system where we were only focusing on one kind of recognition, which was all about number of years of service. So every month, every year we had some type of, well, you've worked here 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25, 35. And, you know,
Hmm.
the typical stuff, they all get a little, you know,
Yeah.
watch or a plaque or something. Well, for some reason, we weren't hitting our operational initiatives. We weren't hitting our goals. In fact, we were one of the lowest in the healthcare system out of like 22 hospitals. And we had a brand new, very influential CEO that had kind of a military, and not only that, started at McDonald's of all things when he was a youth, but he did a great job of saying it needs to be multifaceted. We need to have all kinds of plans. So every leader is going to be accountable to write 25 thank you notes a week. You know, we are going to have acknowledgement in our every single meeting, and it's going to be relative to our strategic goals, and we're going to recognize. You know,
Hmm.
we're going to have events such as chocolate fondue fountain parties, and go around at night on the nursing units and having the executive scene. And then we also had the Bright Idea program, service excellence programs, found all of the things. So we pretty much did all of these things. We
Hmm.
were able, from an operations and return on investment, in literally 1 year, we were able to take one of the lowest performing hospitals to one of the best. It was called Banner's Best of the Best in that healthcare system. And I think a lot of it had to do with the way we recognized achievement and recognition. And it was all a multi-plan. The other thing we learned is that you can't just do a flavor of the month program. You can't, because I was in charge of most of these things. You can't just have a Bright Idea program, not measure it, not recognize for it, not just stick it into a spreadsheet. You literally have to work this program, and try to avoid calling it a program. That was the other problem.
Yeah.
Another HR program. So
Yeah.
it is very, very, very powerful if you do this right.
Yes, and lots of companies do a variety of these things. I mean, there's Southwest Airlines does what they call the kicktail peer recognition program, and so this is where they're, customers and also employees can give a card to somebody that's showing outstanding, service quality and so forth, and that person can take that card and turn it in to be part of to be eligible for a larger award. And so Southwest Airlines, they have, well, at the particular time of this study, they had about 30,000 employees, and they put over $1 million into this program and into awards for the people that had those values that they're displaying. Also, another example is McDonald's. So McDonald's being a franchise, they don't really have control of the real workplace or what's going on in each workplace as much as a more cohesive organization does. But what they do is they focus on that high level, that outstanding formal level, where they're giving a corporate service award, the government relations award. There's a lot of different types of awards that they're giving at the corporate or formal level than they are doing at these others because of the franchise environment they're in.
Yeah, so I think it's excellent to do research on some of the successful practices of these organizations that have been sustainable, that have thrived through these difficult times, and what exactly are they doing? It's really
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, did you have a comment?
I did want to actually just call out something, Sam. I think you're speaking to this pretty well, but there's a little bit of a conversation happening in the chat. Andre says that, are we recognizing success or appreciation of contribution and the amount of effort? And I was writing back this sort of thing I've heard, and I know you've heard this too, the trophy generation. Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of use this derogatory term to describe millennials who grew up, and if you played in a sport, you got a trophy, even if you didn't score or win. And I do think that you have to have a letter grade assigned to your performance in school. And so I think a lot of what we're talking about here is needing to be shaped a lot earlier in some of the systems around education and how we raise children, because it's just hard to have it come into the workplace without it having actually a bigger context in life.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, the recognition has to be meaningful and genuine. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's somebody just walks by and gives you a gift card and says, hey, hey, great, thanks a lot, and they walk away. I mean, you're not deriving a lot of value there. So it's definitely the delivery of recognition is quite important, and who it comes from. That's why a lot of people like this peer-to-peer can be very meaningful when you're getting recognized from a peer or a colleague that sees what you're doing and appreciates the support you're giving.
And I
the
think
peer-to-peer, we need to make it easy for the employee to do the peer-to-peer. I'm
Right.
sorry, what were you saying, Lisa?
Well, just that I think we do need to retrain people's mindset. So as we're coaching and developing leaders in organization, understanding that we're some cases looking for people who naturally just either were raised that way or do that naturally, but also retraining the mindset of why this is so important. What you're talking about today is exactly that. That there is a set of skills that are required to get the best from people, and these are what those skills look like. That it isn't just you performed well, congratulations, here's your paycheck and bonus.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, my piece, as I mentioned before, is I help companies, I help their employees perform better so the companies can perform better. And that involves both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. But intrinsic, as we spent a lot of time on, needs to exist first for extrinsic motivation factors to work. Now, it doesn't have to exist in complete entirety as we went through, but definitely pieces of that need to be in place. And so what are the main factors here that the top motivational factors in extrinsic motivation? Well, of course, we have competitive pay and benefits and recognition and bonus programs, short and long-term incentive programs. And so I'm going to dive into this a little bit more in detail. And so the adequate pay, this is, as we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is at the most fundamental level here, is making sure that pay is right, because pay is really a medium of exchange for the needs that we need to have, food, water, and the garbage service. I mean, it could be all those things, rent, housing. We need to have adequate pay levels and fair, adequate pay levels to be able to start even at that lowest level of a hierarchy. And so a lot of companies are unsure if they're actually paying competitively. And so I help a lot of those companies through a competitive compensation analysis, doing a benchmark study looking at pay in that particular industry, in that area, and in those jobs, and ensuring that those companies are actually delivering adequate pay or competitive pay in those areas. Now, this is also a need in benefits. Now, benefits is the next step up in the safety area, and those need to be competitive and meet the needs of the employee group. And so what should be done on a regular basis here is looking at the needs of your demographic, the benefits that you're providing, giving or meeting their needs. And so that is a piece that we should be looking at on an annual basis to ensure we're getting above those primary needs, so that we can really start driving motivation with so what I call strategic pay and benefits. So those benefits that really recognize or reward and make a person feel like that they're special or they're getting something that is unique to their needs, that can motivate. And also strategic pay, making sure that we have those incentives or maybe targeting certain areas a higher rate than others because of how it drives performance in the company. And so I mentioned this before, part of our, to really understand strategic pay and benefits and evolve this over time, we need to complete that workforce experience scorecard to understand what a company's demographic demands and their needs are, to ensure that they have the right programs in place. Now, the next piece here is fair pay. Now, as we get up into the hierarchy and as far as belonging, this is the next piece that we want to make sure that people are paid fairly across all these different age groups and gender and based on their lifestyle or national origin and so forth, so that they feel like they're part of that group and everybody's treated fairly. So that's quite important. And this can be done through a periodic audit to ensure that you're doing this fairly, and then also putting in pay ranges and having a pay practice or a pay structure will help encourage fairness and more pay structure or more pay equity as you go along as well.
But don't you think there's more of a demand right now relative to companies needing this type of service, Sam?
Well, there is
with the racial unrest.
Well, that and plus regulation. I mean, there's you can look at various places around the globe where pay or fair pay is mandatory. I mean, you have to do regular reporting in the U.S. and also U.K. and a lot of other jurisdictions. I know Colorado is just launching a fair pay initiative that is coming out in January. And it's good to have an audit in your pocket so that you know that you're paying fairly in case you're ever challenged. Canada has their programs, and so more and more this is becoming a more issue. Fair pay and transparent pay are becoming quite important. Like we talked about safety, transparent pay is where the trust element comes in. Mm-hmm. So. And then also recognition and bonus programs. Now, what I'm showing here is the prevalence of programs and how impactful they are. Char, you mentioned length of service. A lot of companies have length of service programs, but their impact is really low on motivation. But as we move up this hierarchy, we have merit pay and formal recognition programs and peer-to-peer recognition, spot bonus programs when you're looking at a certain behavior or an activity of a person, you're giving a bonus on the spot or recognition on the spot to show that your appreciation. Those can be very powerful for motivation. And then also the real-time performance elements there can be very powerful as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're looking at right now is ways we can compensate differently. And it's not just a commission-based structure, very much more behaviors, talents, attributes, superpower focused compensation programs. So your team really has a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
Very different than your traditional employer.
Yeah, it's important to have a whole host of these. And like I mentioned at the beginning, there's not only one thing you need to focus on as part of a motivator. There's a variety of things. And when you have the right managerial skill and organization in your company, the next thing to think about is also these incentive programs, both short and long-term incentive programs. There's some basic ones that are out there, such as profit sharing and gain sharing for some companies. But incentive pay is found to be very, very motivational in driving specific behaviors and outcomes, as long as you have people that already have the intrinsic motivation ready to go. And so here we're taking people that are already intrinsically motivated, and we're focusing their behaviors on a certain outcome. And so, and it's not right for every role. Some roles will not be suitable for incentive pay. Because of the mindset of that role, such as those that are more artistic in nature. They want to have more freedom involved in being creative and explorative, and don't want to be driven or told what to do, and coming up with an outcome. And that's where their own creativity is fostering. This is what Dan Pink was talking about in that book Drive a lot. So not all jobs are suitable for incentive pay. So it's important to make sure that you're incenting the right jobs.
Well, I know we have about 8 more minutes left, Sam, but I do want to bring up something that I think a lot of our HR and executive leaders and business owners are thinking about. Mm-hmm. Revamping our entire pay programs and reward programs. Does that necessarily mean it's going to cost more? Is it going to cost the company more money to be able to do these things? Because I think that's often a barrier, particularly in cost-saving measure times.
Well, it's often found with my the clients I take on is that these are often cost-saving initiatives. I mean, of course, it takes the consulting effort and so forth. It takes an investment, but the amount that is saved over time is immense. For instance, just making sure that you're paying competitively can save you 3 to 5% on your pay budgets year over year, because you don't overpay and you're not losing people because you're not paying enough. And then we found that it saves, I mean, if you can imagine, do the math in your company, what is 3% of your overall pay budget? It's a lot of money. And
Right.
so it can very big cost savings. Absolutely.
So being able to translate it to metrics and having a team like yours could really help us figure that out, and really be able to speak to that executive team. It's not necessarily going to cost us more. It's actually going to save us tens of thousands of dollars, and we'll be a more productive company
That's
overall.
right. I mean, it's not just pay, but these other, like the TMA method, where we're looking at a lot of those intrinsic factors and developing and thinking about competencies. The mere fact that management is spending time focusing on developing that individual and showing care, will dramatically reduce turnover and increase engagement and motivation and performance. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So one thing I want to show here in this final slide here is just how this all comes together. And so we have the blue elements here that are intrinsic, and the gray is I'm sorry, it's the other way around. And the gray is the intrinsic, the blue is the extrinsic. And so as we look at this, there's multiple ways of that. There's not just, like I mentioned, there's not just one way or one motivator that we need to do. We can't just think about adequate pay and stop there. We need to look at the entire reward mix or motivational alignment of how we're really driving performance in our organizations. And so, first of all, I mean, it's good to start at these lower levels and work our way up. And so making sure you're paying fairly and making sure that you have those basic needs in the workplace, making sure your benefits are competitive. You have, that safety. Your leaders are managing finances so that you don't have a layoff. So you're giving people the security or job security. That means having a responsible balance between internal employees and external contractors, and so you can have more of an agile workforce. Belonging here, making sure that you have fair pay, making sure that you're encouraging psychological safety and diversity. The ego, esteem, making sure that you're rewarding people for their outstanding performance with bonuses, incentive, and increases in their base pay over time as they advance, giving them recognition and that respect and having them feel like that they are competent and a competent professional and advancing in their career. And then finally, self-actualization, giving those development opportunities, career architecture, and career pathing, looking at more wealth building type of plans out there, long-term incentives, and then professional or an outreach to the community, and that kind of recognition will bring a lot of value here.
This is fantastic. I mean, to finally see it. I mean, I think we've been talking Maslow, the basics. I don't think any people in our industry doesn't understand the fundamental aspect of that, but the way that you have this aligned with the intrinsic and extrinsic makes a ton of sense. If we can just take the time to sit down and iron out that strategy and get the executive buy-in of why this is so important, I mean, this is very fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, Lisa?
Agree. I have no more thoughts, which is a rarity. So enjoy.
Yeah. Like always, as part of our event here, we want to make sure that we are giving people the opportunity to try out the TMA platform. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch our poll for those that are on the call. If you'd like to go in and take a look at the TMA process and complete an assessment and see how that is and see how that can benefit your life as well as your company or companies you work with, please reach out to me or just sign up right here through the poll, and we can send out an invite to you so you can have a complimentary check of a TMA.
Yeah, what just an amazing gift just to have an initial conversation, to be thinking out of the box and what we can do during these times. And I know I hate I'm not a finance person. I have to just admit, you might have figured that out. I'm not a numbers or a finance person, but I'm a people person, as they always say. I don't know why they call us that, but I think it is very, very magical to be able to blend that too and really have that understanding of finance, rewards, compensation, how motivation all ties together. I mean, that is just awesome to be able to actually have a plan put together. So taking advantage of those 15 minutes with any one of us, Lisa on culture, and myself and Sumit people strategy, and Sam the total rewards and compensation strategy. I mean, that's amazing. And as we're starting to wrap up here, just again, please take advantage of our TMA tool. If you want to email Sam here, just let him know that you'd like to try it out, because I think if once you see it in practice, you'll see how it can be applied. You could talk to me and I can explain how I've applied all of this to my company, from talent acquisition to employee development to improving my total reward program. I've applied all of the TMA into my small organization, and I'm telling you, our productivity has gone out the roof. We are thriving in this time period, which a lot of companies right now can't say. So it does work. So in wrapping up today, Sam, so we have one more minute. What's our topic for next week? I don't have it written down.
Oh, geez. You know, I don't have that written down either. I have it in front of me. I was consumed in this topic.
Well,
So stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. We're going to have everything around all the topics of talent management strategy. So please stay tuned. And as we wrap up here, go to comteam.net, take a look at our prior recordings, take a look at our future upcoming events, and LinkedIn with us, share with us on social media. And we appreciate all of you long-term listeners. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful week during these interesting times. And we really appreciate your participation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.